everyone, my name is Ashley and welcome back to my home. Today I'm working on a couple different kitchen projects, the first of which is homemade broth. Today we're going to make chicken broth, and while you can usually add anything like onions and garlic and carrots, any vegetable that you want, any herb, I'm going to stick to pretty simple. It's just going to be chicken, celery, and bay leaves. This has sort of been my go-to lately. It's simple. We usually have the ingredients around. Typically when I make my broth, I use my Instant Pot. While I have used stovetop cooking before, I find that my Instant Pot can get it done quicker, and it's in a really good quantity that makes it easy to process, and then I go ahead and freeze it. Today I'm going to actually make 2 batches through the Instant Pot, so I have enough to freeze 1 batch, and then I'll also show the process on pressure canning and pressure can the other batch. So let's go ahead and get started. I have an incredibly small kitchen, so bear with me as I try to capture everything here. So the first thing I want to talk about was chicken. Now you can make chicken broth using any kind of chicken. You can literally just use chicken meat. You can use bones that have the meat taken completely off of them. You can use whole chickens, any kind of cut of chicken. I, however, go for bones that have been the meat's already been removed. And these are already pre-shrink wrapped and frozen. So they're really convenient. And they're going to go in my freezer when they come home anyway until I'm ready to use them. Next ingredient that I always add to broth, pretty much no matter what I'm doing, no matter what else I'm putting in it, is celery. Now, celery is one of those foods that's on the Dirty Dozen list. I'm not sure if you are aware of what that is, but it's a list of fruits and vegetables that tend to have higher concentrations of pesticides. So if you want to buy organic food, but you're not really sure which ones to get or which ones to start out with, that list is a really great place to start. Typically, the conventional versions have a lot more pesticides. Go ahead and switch over to the organic versions, and celery is one of them. And then the one herb or seasoning that I'm going to add is bay leaf. And we get these bay leaves in bulk from our co-op. And I can never get enough of them. I add so many. I love buying these in bulk because I can get almost all of these for probably less than 10 cents. They're so light. And by buying in bulk, everything is, the price is based on weight. One thing that I saw recently show up at our co-op, which I'm super, super excited about, is these plastic bags for produce. So what they're called is they're made from ocean plastic. Turn the Tide is the organization, I believe, that's doing it, but they're all made from plastic that has been recovered from the oceans. And a huge value of mine is always to try to reduce the impact on the earth as much as possible. That's part of why I like to garden. That's part of why I like to can food. That's why I like to make my own food or try to grow my own food, because I feel like there's less of an impact by my doing so. And in turn, it's also healthier for us. We can avoid chemicals that might be found in food packaging, just reducing food packaging coming from the stores. And I feel really good doing it. And I also feel like it's a really good example for my kids and other people. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start to get things chopped up here. I'm going to get my celery chopped up, and it's rough. It's whatever you feel like doing. I don't want the pieces to be too big because I want them to be able to kind of work their way in between the bones and all of that. But I say just a pile. Now this Instant Pot is sort of the halfway size. It's not the real big one, but it's not the real small one. And I have filled the water up to the half mark fill. That typically works well for the ingredients I end up putting in. So that's probably half a bunch of celery. I usually put between 5 and 8 bay leaves in. I just feel like you can never have enough of that bay leaf flavor. Oh, they smell so good. A little splash of apple cider vinegar. This helps to bring out some of the collagen and things in the bones that typically are a lot harder to take out unless you're cooking it for a really long time. Of course, the pressure cooking helps to draw those things out as well. And then the apple cider vinegar just assists in that process. So now I'll use my kitchen shears. Get this bag off of here. Slide that right in. And once that is in, it so conveniently goes right to the pressure can full line. This is it's about 1 3/4 pounds of bones. Also, I do want to mention that if you can buy bones bulk from your local butcher department, a butcher store, or a co-op. They're really reasonably priced. Of course, bones are a byproduct of eating meat, so you can always use leftover bones from things you cooked. But if you don't have any, or you don't eat a lot of meat but you want to make broth, buying from the department directly is a really good idea. These are typically, well, these are 99 cents a pound. Okay, I got my hands washed up and I put away anything that touched raw meat. And I'm gonna go ahead and get this turned on. I run my broth for 90 minutes. I've never had another pressure cooker, so I'm not really sure what the difference would be, but this is typically, but this runs on high and I let it go for an hour and a half. In terms of the release, I just let it kind of cool down I let it cool down naturally. It's been a busy day so far, but we're getting lots done. Our pressure cooker just stopped after its natural release, so I'm gonna go ahead and strain out the solids from the liquid and we'll get our broth cooling down. I'm gonna let this cool down for a while in this bowl so I don't put this super hot broth directly into this glass container. Once it cools down a little bit, I'm going to transfer it here into this jar and then I'll let it cool completely overnight. I'll probably put it outside because this time of year it's so cold that it's actually a really good way to cool things down. And then after it cools down enough to be able to put in the fridge, I'll do that. And then tomorrow we'll be back to do some canning. I'm gonna get a second batch going right now in the Instant Pot. I'm just going to empty out my solid contents and then probably just give it a little rinse and then just refill it and get it started again. Welcome to day 2 of broth. I had the broth in the fridge overnight and now we have to skim off the fat layer. First, I want to show you the difference between the 2 batches of broth that I made. Initially, I was thinking that I would just do the chicken with the celery and the bay leaves, but then when I got the second batch started, I was inspired to add some garlic and some carrots as well. Some of the carrots that I added were actually like a deep purple carrot, and it really made the color beautiful. So let's take a look. First, I just want to show the layer of fat that rose to the top of all of the broth, and we want to get that out. When you can meat or anything meat related, or anything that's even not meat related, you want to reduce the amount of fat that's in the jars. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is put the broth in the jars that we're going to put in the freezer. And the reason I'm going to do those first is because we want these to be cooled down, which our broth is already. So if I heat up the broth for the jars I want to put through the canner first, then the broth would need to cool down again. So I'm going to go ahead and see how many jars I can get filled with the cold broth, and then we'll move on to the canning. One thing that you want to think about if you're going to freeze broth is that you're using a jar that has straight sides. A jar like this that we're going to can in has this shoulder, and that can break when the broth expands in the freezer. And so Ball makes these wide mouth pints that are great for freezing. I freeze all my broth in these. And then they also actually have a little line on the newer jars that say to fill to this line for freezing. So a pint is 2 cups. This line is just a little over the 1.5 cup line. So you do have a little bit less in the jars that you freeze, However, I think it's definitely worth being able to still freeze. Okay, so that worked out great. We had 6 pints or thereabout. And so all 5 of these will go in the freezer. And then this little leftover, somebody will drink or we'll throw it in some food that we're making this week. The other thing I thought I would do, as long as I'm warming up the broth that's going to go in these jars, is instead of put the broth in the jars unsalted, that I would go ahead and salt it to taste before I put it in cannon. Normally when I freeze broth, I don't salt it at all. This is so that we can use it in recipes that might already have a lot of salt, and we don't need that added salt from the broth. And then also we can salt it to taste if we're just drinking it. We've got a good rolling boil going. I'll just turn that down and let it boil for a little bit. Whenever you're canning, you want to make sure that all of your things are relatively the same temperature in order to avoid breaking jars, and it just helps the canning process. And so we want to have hot broth. I've got water here to dip my jars in. That not only will sanitize it again, but it'll also make sure that the hot liquid is going into a hot jar. I also have the canner over here heating up. I'm going to move it over to the larger burner before, of course, it gets going, but for now it's just kind of warming up so that the jars go in to some hot liquid. For canning the broth, once it builds up pressure to 10 pounds, you pressure can it for 20 minutes. And I have let it cool down. The lid has been removed. And here we are. All 8 jars have actually already created a seal, so I'm just going to go ahead and lift these out. I'm going to go ahead and let these cool down, and then once they are completely cooled, I'll remove the rings, wash the jars, label them with the date and what it is, and they'll be ready to be stored on the shelf. Thanks for hanging out with me. Thanks for watching. If you thought this video was helpful, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more of what comes out of my kitchen, please consider subscribing, and we'll see you soon.